You have been staring at a door for years. Not a closed one, an open one. A wide open door with 100 hallways behind it, each one leading somewhere real, somewhere possible, somewhere you could actually go. And you have not moved. Not because you are lazy, not because you lack ambition. You have more ambition than most people you know. That is the problem. You can see too many versions of the life you could build. The business, the creative pursuit, the career pivot, the city you could move to, the person you could become if you just committed to one direction long enough to see what happens. Every single one of them is plausible. Every single one of them excites you. And every single one of them requires you to abandon the others. So you stay in the hallway. You research. You plan. You make vision boards and journal entries and late-night lists of pros and cons. You tell yourself you are being strategic, thoughtful, careful. But here is what is actually happening. You are standing in front of unlimited possibility, and you are drowning in it. Not thriving, drowning. A psychologist named Barry Schwartz spent 2 decades studying what happens to human beings when they are given too many choices. In 2000, researchers Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper set up a tasting booth at an upscale grocery store. One display offered 24 varieties of jam. Another offered 6. The large display attracted more visitors. More people stopped. More people sampled. But when it came time to actually purchase, only 3% of the people who saw 24 options bought anything. 30% of the people who saw 6 options bought a jar. When the cognitive load of choosing becomes too heavy, the brain defaults to paralysis. It chooses nothing. That study was about jam. But you are doing the same thing with your life. And there is a reason you cannot stop doing it. A reason that has nothing to do with needing more information, more clarity, or more time. A reason a Danish philosopher identified almost 200 years ago that most people still have not understood. There is a story about Michelangelo that most people misunderstand. When asked how he created the statue of David, he reportedly said that the figure was already inside the marble. His job was simply to remove everything that was not David. People repeat this as inspirational wisdom. Find what is already inside you. Chip away the excess. Reveal your true form. But they miss the terrifying implication of what he was actually describing. Before Michelangelo touched that block of marble, it contained every possible sculpture, every figure, every form, every masterpiece that could ever be carved from that particular stone existed simultaneously inside it. David was in there. But so were 10,000 other works. A reclining figure, a horse in motion, a weeping angel, an abstract form no one had ever imagined. All of them real, all of them possible, all of them waiting. The moment he pressed chisel to stone, he did not only create David, he killed everything else. Every strike was an act of creation and an act of destruction happening in the same motion. He could not reveal one form without annihilating all the others. That was not a secondary effect. That was the primary mechanism. Creation requires destruction. Choosing one thing means murdering 1,000 alternatives that were equally real, equally beautiful, equally possible. This is what you are refusing to do. You are the uncarved block, full of potential, full of possibility, full of every version of yourself that could ever exist. And you are worshiping that state. You have made an idol out of your own potential, because potential, unacted upon, is safe. It cannot fail. It cannot be judged. It cannot be measured against what it could have been. The moment you carve, you are accountable. The moment you choose a form, every other form becomes a ghost, and ghosts haunt. In 1844, a 31-year-old Danish philosopher named Soren Kierkegaard published a book that would take the rest of the century to be understood. It was called The Concept of Anxiety, and in it, he described something that no thinker before him had been able to name. He asked his reader to imagine a man standing on the edge of a cliff. The man experiences two kinds of fear simultaneously. The first is obvious, the fear of falling, the external danger, the threat from outside. But the second fear is far stranger and far more devastating. It is the fear that comes from realizing he is completely free to jump. Not that he wants to jump, not that he intends to, but that nothing, absolutely nothing, is preventing him from choosing to. The only thing between him and the void is his own decision. And that decision must be made continuously, moment by moment, with nothing to lean on but his own will. Kierkegaard called this experience the dizziness of freedom, and he argued it was not limited to cliffs. It was the fundamental condition of being human. Every moment of genuine choice produces it. Every crossroads where the path is not determined for you by circumstance, by tradition, by necessity, by someone else telling you what to do. In those moments, you feel the full weight of possibility pressing down on you. And it does not feel like liberation. It feels like vertigo. What makes this insight devastating is what it implies about the modern world. When Kierkegaard wrote, most people had very few genuine choices. Your profession was determined by your father's profession. Your location was determined by your birth. Your spouse was determined by your community. The anxiety of freedom was an occasional visitor. It appeared at rare, significant crossroads. Now consider your situation. You live in an era of effectively unlimited optionality. You can work from anywhere, for anyone, doing anything. You can reinvent yourself every 3 years. You can access every philosophy, every skill set, every community, every identity, every lifestyle through a screen in your pocket. The number of genuine crossroads you face is not occasional. It is constant, daily, hourly. What Kierkegaard described as a philosophical condition has become your permanent psychological address. Research from 2025 found that 75% of adults between 25 and 33 have experienced what psychologists now call a quarter-life crisis. That phrase sounds almost trivial, but the data underneath it is not. The most commonly reported feeling is not sadness or anger. It is paralysis, the inability to commit to a direction when every direction is available. You are not confused. You are dizzy, and the dizziness is coming from freedom itself. There is a specific kind of grief that no one teaches you to expect. It does not come from losing something you had. It comes from releasing something you never chose. Every time you commit to one path, you extinguish the others, not temporarily, permanently, because time is moving. The version of you who could have gone to medical school at 22 is gone at 35. The version of you who could have moved to Berlin and started over is not the same person who will do it at 42 with a mortgage and children. The options do not simply wait in a drawer for you. They decay. They expire. They become impossible through the simple accumulation of time. Kierkegaard wrote about this in a passage that sounds almost like it was written for your generation. He said that if you marry, you will regret it. If you do not marry, you will also regret it. Whether you marry or do not marry, you will regret it either way. He went on to apply this to everything. Laugh at the world's foolishness. You will regret it. Weep over it. You will regret it. Either way, you will regret. This is not pessimism. It is precision. He was naming the structural reality of finite existence. You are a creature who can imagine infinite possibilities, but can only live one life. The gap between what you can envision and what you can embody is not a flaw in your psychology. It is the fundamental architecture of being human. And that gap produces grief. Real grief. For the lives you will never live. For the people you will never become. For the doors that close silently behind you every single day. You remain in the hallway, deciding. But here is what most people do with this grief. They refuse it. They tell themselves that not choosing keeps the doors open. That flexibility is wisdom. That maintaining optionality is strategic. And this is the most dangerous lie of the modern era, because it sounds intelligent. It sounds measured. It sounds like the kind of thing a thoughtful person would do. It is not wisdom. It is anesthesia. Here is where this becomes uncomfortable, because everything up to this point has validated your experience. You felt seen. The paralysis was named. The mechanism was explained. The grief was acknowledged. And now comes the part you are not going to like. You are not keeping your options open because you are wise. You are keeping your options open because you are afraid. And what you are afraid of is not making the wrong choice. What you are afraid of is making any choice at all. Because a choice is a death. And you have spent your entire adult life avoiding that particular funeral. Carl Jung understood this. He called the process of becoming a specific, defined, limited self individuation. And he knew that the word itself was terrifying. To individuate means to become indivisible, to become one thing, not everything, not the infinite potential self that exists in your imagination, but a real, concrete, finite person who has chosen, who has committed, who has become. Jung said that people will do almost anything to avoid this process. They will stay in relationships they have outgrown. They will remain in careers that bore them. They will distract themselves with entertainment and consumption and endless research into alternatives. Anything to avoid the moment where the chisel meets the stone and the other forms begin to die. A developmental psychologist named Robert Kegan identified the specific mechanism behind this avoidance. He called it the immunity to change. It works like this. You have a stated goal. I want to commit to a career direction. I want to choose a path. I want to stop living in possibility and start building something real. That is what you say you want. But underneath that stated goal is a hidden, competing commitment that directly contradicts it. The competing commitment might sound like this: I am also committed to never being locked into something that is wrong for me. I am committed to never grieving a lost alternative. I am committed to the feeling of being someone with unlimited potential, because that feeling is the closest thing I have to an identity. Read that last line again. Because it is the shadow that nobody talks about, your potential has become your identity. Not what you have built, not what you have endured, not what you have chosen and committed to and struggled through and failed at and rebuilt. Your identity is what you could do, theoretically, someday, under the right circumstances. And the reason you will not choose is that choosing forces you to exchange an infinite, untested, unfalsifiable identity for a finite, testable, vulnerable one. A person of unlimited potential cannot fail because they have never tried. A person who has chosen can fail, can be measured, can be found wanting. The uncarved block is always perfect. The finished sculpture invites criticism. This is not a strategic posture. It is a hiding place, and you have been living in it for years. If the hiding place were free, this would not matter. Stay in potential forever. Dream without consequence. But it is not free. The hallway has a price, and you are paying it every day, and the currency is your life. Here is what happens to human beings who refuse to commit. People who relentlessly maximize, who keep searching for the best option, who refuse to settle for good enough, end up objectively more successful, but subjectively more miserable. They get the slightly better job, the slightly better apartment, the slightly better deal. And they feel worse about all of it, because they are haunted. Every choice they finally make is shadowed by the phantom of the choice they did not make. But the deeper cost is not psychological discomfort. It is existential, the despair of possibility. A self drowning in possibility never becomes anything. It runs through possibilities without limit, never finding a foothold, never arriving at anything firm. And this was a form of despair more dangerous than the despair of limitation, because it disguises itself as freedom. The person crushed by necessity knows they are suffering. The person dissolved in possibility thinks they are thriving. Think about someone you know who is older than you. Someone who spent their 20s deciding, their 30s reconsidering, their 40s finally accepting that maybe the deciding itself was the problem. What does their face look like when they talk about it? Not regret for the wrong choice. Regret for no choice. The slow, dawning realization that the hallway they were standing in was not a waiting room. It was the room. And they spent their years there, thinking the real life was behind one of the doors they never opened. Friedrich Nietzsche issued a command that sounds simple, but contains the entire solution. Become who you are. Not discover who you are. Not figure out who you are. Become. The verb is active. It implies construction, effort, commitment, risk. It implies that the self does not exist in advance of your choices, waiting to be found. The self is created by your choices, built through the things you do and the things you endure and the things you sacrifice. You will not find yourself in the hallway. you will only find yourself on the other side of a commitment that terrified you. Return to the marble block. Michelangelo, standing before 4 tons of Carrara stone, chisel in hand, understanding that the first strike will end something, feeling the full weight of what he is about to destroy in order to create something that can actually exist in the world. This is the moment most people never reach, not the moment of inspiration, not the moment of planning, the moment of irrevocable action, the strike that cannot be taken back, the cut that transforms potential into form, and in doing so, murders every other form that stone could have held. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also said that this becoming requires a sacrifice, not the sacrifice of comfort or convenience, the sacrifice of every other self you could have been, the sacrifice of the infinite for the finite, the sacrifice of the imagined for the real. And he said that this sacrifice, this willingness to let the other versions die, is the central psychological task of adulthood. Most cultures used to enforce this sacrifice through ceremony. The initiation rite, the marriage vow, the apprenticeship, the ordination. Each one was a ritual death of the uncommitted self and a ritual birth of the committed one. The ceremony said, publicly and irrevocably, you are now this and not that. You have been carved. There is no going back to the block. Modern culture has dismantled every one of those ceremonies, not maliciously, in the name of freedom, in the name of not limiting people, in the name of endless optionality. And the result is a generation standing before the marble with a chisel in hand and no permission to strike, no cultural framework that says the striking is sacred, no elders who say, yes, the other forms must die, and that death is not tragedy, it is consecration. So you must give yourself permission, not because someone told you to, but because the alternative is the hallway. The alternative is the uncarved block sitting in the studio for 40 years, admired for its potential, never becoming anything anyone can touch or see or be changed by. Here is the truth that Kierkegaard spent his life trying to communicate, that Jung spent his life trying to demonstrate, that Nietzsche spent his life trying to live. Freedom is not the absence of constraint. Freedom is the willingness to choose constraint, to look at the infinite hallway of open doors and walk through one, not because you are certain it is the right one, because certainty was never available, because certainty was never the point, because the dizziness does not resolve through more research, more planning, more time. It resolves through the act of commitment itself. The anxiety you feel right now, tonight, about the direction of your life is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is the exact sensation Kierkegaard described on that cliff edge. It is freedom, looking down into its own possibility and feeling vertigo. And the only way through it is the same way through vertigo. You move, you step, you commit your weight to a direction, and you let the ground meet you or not. Every choice is a funeral and a birth in the same breath. Every commitment mourns the alternatives it eliminates. That grief is real. You are allowed to feel it. You are supposed to feel it, because the grief means something was lost. And something was lost because something else was chosen. And something chosen is infinitely more valuable than something imagined. a finished sculpture, imperfect and real, standing in the light where people can see it and argue about it and be moved by it. That will always be worth more than a perfect block of marble in a studio where no one has ever decided what it should become. The block does not need more time. It needs the chisel. You do not need more clarity. You need more courage. Not the courage to choose correctly, the courage to choose at all, and to stay with that choice long enough for it to become something, long enough for the stone to reveal what was always inside it, long enough for you to discover that the form that emerges is not the one you planned, but the one that was waiting for you to be brave enough to find it. Pick up the chisel. Grieve what the first strike will kill. And begin. If you felt the weight of that marble block on your shoulders tonight, write in the comments, "First strike." And tell me, what is the one choice you have been circling for months or years that you already know the answer to?